So it seems the last couple months have just kind of flown by, and I think what y'all did at the end of the year, like you were the church to our community, and I just thought that was so cool. You know, back in November, you provided over 120 Thanksgiving meals for families here in Omaha. You adopted 360 kids who go to the Millard schools and provided Christmas presents for them. In 2016, y'all gave over $1.5 million to our building, to our budget, to missions. More in all those areas than you've ever given before, and that was just really cool. Our Christmas Eve services, we had over 1,500 people here. That's the most we've ever had for either Christmas Eve or Easter. I know y'all invited people, and it was just really cool to see that. And it was the church being the church, and 2017 is going to be our best year yet. There's a young woman that called me up a couple weeks ago and wanted to reserve the new church for a wedding, and it was the first person who had done this. And I was thinking about that, and I called the architect up and the builder, and I said, can we have this done by this time? And they said, yeah, we should be able to make that work. And I said, okay, I'm going to give her mom your cell phone number. But probably as early as March, if the weather cooperates, we'll be moving dirt out there and have a groundbreaking ceremony after a 10:30 service that we'll just invite our community to and encourage y'all to attend. And y'all get to bring little shovels, and it's going to be a great Sunday. And probably as early as May 1st, you're going to see a building starting to emerge from there. And probably a year from now, we may be here, we may be there. So that's just kind of the schedule that's in front of us. But the church is not just a building. The building is going to help us be the church better. So we can invite more people, that we can do a better job with our kids and the kids in the community, that we can do a better job with missions. That's why we're doing this. So just really cool stuff. I think one of the things I want us to do is I want to call us to pray in 2017. And, this is going to, individually, like for you, your relationship with God, because strong people make strong churches. If you're in a family and your family comes, pray together, because strong families create strong churches. I think just take 5 minutes every day and pray. Just see where God leads you. Pray for yourself and your relationship with God. Pray, for your place in the church. Pray for our church, that we, love our relationship into a relationship with Jesus Christ. The next thing is, take 5 minutes and read the Bible. It doesn't seem like much, but if you do it every day for 365 days or 358 days or however many days are left, you're going to read a significant chunk of the Bible, and you're going to allow God daily to speak to you. And the other 5 minutes I want you to take each day is just serve somebody intentionally in those 5 minutes. You may write a note of encouragement, send them a text message, make a phone call, here at the school, intentionally help one of your classmates at work. Just do something out of the ordinary, and no one even has to see it. I think it'd be really cool if all of us, prayed for 5 minutes, got in the Word for 5 minutes, and served for 5 minutes. I believe that we would be different as individuals, and us as the church would be a lot different. So that's what's coming up, and I don't think that we as a church can do God's work without God. We have got to enlist God in the process, and the way we do that is through prayer and service and being faithful to His Word. So one of the things that I do as a United Methodist pastor is Nebraska and Kansas are like one geographical area. So our bishop lives in Wichita, and all of us are like what's called one annual conference together. So every year we probably have about 30, 35 new pastors that are going to take over new churches. So many of these are going to be second career people or early retired people that are going to take small churches, in central Kansas or western Nebraska. No theological training at all. Usually a dozen to 15 of them have gone to like a 3-year seminary, and they've had 3 years of theological and ministry training. And so one of the things I do during this 2-week course, I'm only there for a week, but what I do is I teach the section on preaching. So I have all the new folks, and most of them have never done sermons before, and I get them for 5 days, 4 hours a day. Can you imagine listening to me for 4 hours straight for 5 days? Wouldn't that just be great? I mean, I know some of you are going to come up and say, how do I sign up for this ministry thing so I can experience that, Craig? We break it up into small bits and pieces, and I don't believe it's possible to drink through a fire hose, so we just kind of keep it really simple. I say, here's how you preach. You stand up there with your hand in your pocket. That's the first thing you do. And you say a lot. Okay, I don't say that, but yeah, it's just the basic, simple stuff. Like, get to know the people, love them, serve them, listen to their story. Like, as a preacher, that's going to be the most important thing you do. Because until, they know how much you care, they don't care how much you know. One of the things I say is, like, be yourself. I borrowed this from someone else. Be a first-rate version of you and not a second-rate version of somebody else. Just be authentic. God has called you to this church, not somebody else. Be yourself. Spend time in God's Word daily. We're not here to give motivational speeches. We're here to get into the Word. Try different types of sermons. Find ones that work for you. You can go verse by verse. You can do narrative sermons. So we teach them about the different types of sermons there are. One of the things I say is no one is ever going to complain that a sermon is too short. Never had that complaint once, so you don't need to go overboard. They laughed at that the first service. I don't know if there's something different in their coffee. So I always try to do some communication stuff too, and so researchers and like professional communicators would tell you what are the most important 3 or 4 minutes of any speech. It's going to be the first 3 or 4 minutes of any speech. So I said you got to engage the people. You tell a funny story, build some tension but don't resolve it. Talk about something that everybody knows about. Get some audience participation. Do some of that stuff. Those are the good openings. Now, in this morning's text, Jesus is actually doing his first sermon. So let's imagine that Jesus was in front of the group of 30 almost pastors and their teacher. And they all give a little sample sermon. It's about 5 to 8 minutes long or so. And let's imagine that Jesus was up here speaking. So here's what he says. Here's how Jesus opens the sermon. God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth. So I always give the students feedback. I always start with some compliments. Then if there's some growing areas, we talk about those. And I would give Jesus some feedback on this one. If he was there in that class, and I didn't know he was God. If I knew he was God, he wouldn't need any feedback. But let's just say we don't know he's God at this point. So I'd say, okay, so Jesus, you have a very pleasant voice, and you're very confident. That's good. You know the scriptures very well. This is very impressive. Your metaphors are excellent, and you're going to be a good one. So, Jesus, we do need to talk about your opening. I don't think it's quite there yet. Now, first of all, I'm not sure what you're saying. You're talking about blessed is the person that does this or that. There's a lot in there. It's pretty dense, and what I'm thinking you're probably talking about here is the kingdom of heaven is here. The world does things this way, and you're trying to get us to do this and not this. I think that's where you're going. So maybe could you give us some examples of how this works in the real world? Otherwise, solid job. Good. They're going to love you in Central Kansas, and I look forward to seeing you at the annual meeting every year. So Matthew chapter 5 through verse 7, it is his first sermon, and it's also his most well-known sermon. These 3 chapters are called the Sermon on the Mount. This would be the first time that Jesus would have spoken in front of a large group of people. Now, it turns out that his opening's fine because these words are some of the most familiar words that have ever been written. In fact, it turns out that there is more people that have read these words than the words that any other author in human history has ever written. You know these words, even if you're new to church and you've come back after a long time and you didn't grow up reading the Bible. I'm going to give you some of the stuff that he says in chapter 5 through chapter 7, and you're going to know these. Jesus says that you are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Don't put your light under a bushel basket where no one can see it. Put it on the stand, where it may illuminate the entire world. Yeah, Jesus says if someone hits you on one cheek or slaps you on one cheek, that you should, what? You should turn the other cheek. Jesus, and this one does not sell box office tickets. I've never known a movie that's been made about this one, but Jesus says that you should love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And then Jesus writes, or he would have spoken here, the most famous words that have ever been spoken. Jesus is talking about prayer. And he says, and as you pray, you should pray like this. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. And then he goes through the Lord's Prayer. That's in the sermon. Jesus also says a truth that all of us know. He says no one can serve two masters. It's not possible. You can try it and you'll fail. It doesn't work out. Jesus says for all of us who worry or deal with anxiety, he says, can a single one of these worries add a moment to your life? So Jesus is getting near the end of the sermon, and he says something like, I don't want you to judge people. Leave that to me. Don't judge them. Love them. Love them authentically. Love them biblically. And then Jesus, near the end, he closes with what we know today as the golden rule, where he says you should do to others, or you should treat others in the same way that you would want them to treat you. So all that in 3 little chapters. So if you're talking about those like 5 minutes of reading your Bible, I think it'd be really cool just to start in Matthew chapter 5, this week. And probably by the end of the week, you'll make it through chapter 6 and chapter 7, and this is his primary teaching. Now, in the next 4 weeks, what we're going to do is we're just going to look at the first 12 verses of this sermon. These are called the Beatitudes. In each of the opening lines, it reads, God blesses, or another translation says, blessed are. Now, the phrase is known as the Beatitudes. The word beatitude is a Latin word. And the word, it simply just means happy. So in the Latin Catholic Church centuries ago, they would have understood this to mean happy are those who are poor in spirit. Happy are those who mourn. Happy are those who are humble. Now, the Greek word gives us a better idea of what Jesus is talking about when he said the word blessed. Now, the problem with this is and I'll get to this in a second, today we use the word blessed a lot different than the way Jesus used blessed in this context. So what we do is we take our American cultural understanding of the word blessed and we transfer it to the teachings of Jesus. So we're going to look at the Greek word for blessed, and the word here is makarios. Now, the way that the Greeks would have used this word is for example, there's an island south of Greece called Cyprus. Now, this is a phenomenal place. They would use the word makarios to describe the island of Cyprus. So in Cyprus, you can actually just find yourself on one of these long sandy beaches. And the weather year-round is absolutely perfect. Now, you can also drive an hour and a half and find yourself skiing on the top of a mountain. This island it's fertile. It has all the minerals that are needed. So they would have said that it has flowers and fruit trees, and the Greeks would have described Cyprus by saying makarios, this is just this blessed place. It has everything that a person would ever need to be happy within its coastlines. So when Jesus uses the word makarios now for us, the way we can understand this is that we already have everything inside of us for us to experience this blessed, this joyful life. Makarios is a joy, this blessedness, it's really like a joy that's totally self-contained. It is absolutely independent of any changes and chances in life. Now, happiness, as we know it, is going to be very dependent upon changes and chances. We've had changes for the not so good, and all of a sudden, the happiness goes away. We've had some chances that did not go our way. All of a sudden, the blessedness is disappearing. Now, Christian blessedness, on the other hand, is completely untouchable and unassailable. There is nothing that God gives us that anybody else can take away. So Jesus, he says the same thing in the Gospel of John, chapter 22, when he says, no one can rob you of that joy. So this joy that is within us, that is given to us by God, is something that nobody can take away from us. Now, we use the word blessed a little bit different than that. Most of us say the word blessed to describe like good fortune in life. And I've actually heard all these in the last couple years. So someone recently told me, so I got this new widget for Christmas, and I'm really blessed. They didn't actually use the word widget. That's kind of like a generic word, but they said something specific. And someone said, we closed on our house in December, and we moved in early this month, and we're blessed. Or you might have heard someone say, we just got back from this mission trip, and it was overseas, and we got back, and I just realized how blessed we are to live in the United States. Now, being grateful is a really good thing. This is not biblical blessedness. It's just being grateful for what we have. Now, I think it's a great thing, being grateful. In fact, like if you want to be an overachiever and you want to do like 20 minutes instead of 15 minutes, like you can pray, you can read your Bible, you can serve somebody, and you can be thankful for 5 minutes, and that'd be like a really cool thing to do. But when we say that our affluence and our prosperity are our primary blessings, what it does is it reduces God to some sort of skybound, wish-granting genie who spends his days randomly bestowing cash and cars on his followers. What we do with this type of understanding of the Bible is we reduce God to some type of cosmic Santa Claus. Now let's listen to what Jesus says here. Jesus says in John chapter 5, verse 3, God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. God blesses those who are humble, for they'll inherit the whole earth. So there it is. It's written in red letters. It's as plain as day. Now, we can try to hijack the word blessed all we want and try to make it fit into our modern ideals, but the blessing that Jesus gives is totally different than the blessings that the world can give. For many of us then, prayer has become this verbalizing of a wish list rather than authentically and passionately trying to pursue a relationship with the creator of the world. So here's the deal. I'll just be honest with you. I have no idea why I was born. The chances are like almost zero, but I'm here. I have no idea why God has blessed me with the opportunities that I have had in my first 46 years. I don't believe that God has blessed me more than anybody else. And all this stuff is beyond my small brain comprehension. Now, I don't think that Jesus is probably likely to call me blessed. And I don't think that Jesus is probably likely to call you blessed either, because many of you have the same opportunities that I have. You went to good schools and you had good parents. Many of you, have opportunities now that people throughout the world would only dream of. I think what Jesus would tell us is that we're burdened. We're burdened by this responsibility that he has given us so much. It's like a question is going to be like, what are you going to do with it? All this stuff, all these possessions, all this time. Like, what are you going to do with this? Are you going to use it for yourself? Are you going to share it with others and serve others? I think a question that Jesus would have for many of us is, are you valuing comfort and security over a full participation in the kingdom of God? These are hard questions. They don't have easy answers. So a prayer is that we understand these blessings. And I'm going to tell you my blessings. The blessings I have are not the house I live in. The primary blessings I have in my life are not relative good health or a middle-class American standard of living or two moderately behaved kids most of the time, or or my education, these are not my blessings. The blessings in the way that Jesus understands them, and the blessings that I now understand them as his child and someone who seeks to be his disciple. The blessings I have are something like this, that I know that I have a God who understands how to love the unlovable. The blessings in life are the experiencing of the forgiveness of sins. The blessings in my life are that I know a God who gives hope to the hopeless. The blessings in my life are I have understood and I have experienced that his grace is available for all of us. Not only is it available, but it's totally sufficient. The blessing in my life is that I know a God who can comfort those who are sorrowful. Now I know that God has planted this in me, and God has planted this in all of us. So for the blessings, the earthly blessings that I do receive, from him, and that's where they all come from. For the spiritual blessings that God gives to me and to all of us, our response is, use me, Lord. Use me in a way that will bring your kingdom and share your blessings with the entire cosmos. Now, this is the phrase I want you to hear. We experience a perpetual blessedness when we find, are you interested in this, your perpetual blessedness? We experience a perpetual blessedness when we find our identity and our security in Jesus Christ and in him alone. So, in verse 3, we're going to read this one from the New International Version. It's a little bit different than the one I just read. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, that's the opening line of Jesus' first sermon. So I'm thinking that the people that were listening to him are thinking the same thing that you were thinking a little bit ago. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Okay, so poor isn't as good as rich, right? Like more money is better than not that much money. Rich relationships are better than relationships that aren't rich. Like rich health is better than poor health. So wouldn't it make sense if like a rich, robust relationship with God is better than those who are poor in spirit? But Jesus, he's clear. He said, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So the word poor here in the Greek, what it basically means is helplessness. It doesn't mean like poverty. It doesn't mean having less. It basically means helpless or broken. So I have a feeling there's a few of us here that know something about being helpless or broken, right? Let's look at helpless first. I'm going to tell you something that you may or may not know, but it's 100% true, and you can totally disagree with me, and you have every right to be wrong. But you're not in control of your life. Don't think for a moment that you are. Now, some of you may try it, and you may wear yourselves and other people out by trying it, but you're not in control of your life. There are very few things that you're in control of. Now, you can come to this realization in one of two ways. Proactively, which is the way that's recommended, or reactively, in response to this discovery that we're not in control of our life. Now, you cannot control the way that somebody feels about you. Whether that person is your spouse, or your neighbor, or your classmate, like you cannot control that. You can't control, like when you leave here, you can't control when you go down 180th Street, how the person is driving in the oncoming lane. You don't control that one. You don't control the eventual demise of your body. You don't control the world economy. You cannot control how others treat you. Now, I believe that there are many of us who are one paycheck, one drug-addicted child, one illness, one drinking binge, one moment of bad luck from being sent to our knees with this discovery that we're not in control of our life. And we go to our knees because we know that in the end, God is the only one that is powerful enough to clean up this mess. So helpless. When Jesus says poor, we realize now that we're there. Now the next one is broken, and some of us are here, some of us are on our way, some of us have been there, and we're getting better. Now, let me give you some examples of this. Like, you're on your way to church, and the kids are in the back, and they're not getting along, or the person that you're sitting by, you're continuing the conversation that didn't quite get concluded last night, and Things weren't perfect. There might have been some yelling. You weren't overly happy with each other. But then, like, this magic thing appears. The minute that you walk onto the concrete of the Millard West parking lot, like, you transform into this perfect family or this perfect couple or this perfect person. That's not you're chuckling because you know what I'm talking about. Some of us have gone into debt to keep up appearances. There's some of us who work long hours, or we study really hard, or we practice amazingly hard at a sports or a dance or a music, and we do this so that we can earn our worth. I think there's some people that spend hours online trying to convince themselves and trying to convince others that we are a whole lot more than we actually are. Now, as kids, we're taught to be strong, not helpless. We're taught to be whole and not broken. Now, these internal and these external voices are going to tell us to make sure that it appears that our lives are nearly perfect. But look at what Jesus says. Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." Now, the world says, "I want you to be in control. I want you to be independent." These are virtues. And Jesus says, we're blessed when we can experience that we are not in control and that we are fully dependent upon God. So here's how this works. Embracing our brokenness is the one thing that is going to lead us down the road to wholeness. Because God makes the broken whole. He will take in the overlooked, the undervalued, the left out, the written off, the damaged. And then what God will do is what only God can do, and that is this healing process. Now, in our physical world, what happens when something breaks down? Like a car or a piece of furniture or an appliance. When something is broken, like in our physical world, it loses value. We're not going to pay as much for a refrigerator that doesn't work as one that does. Now, the spiritual world, it turns us 180 degrees. The reverse is true. Broken things are absolutely precious. Now, think about the cracks and the breaks in your life. What these are actually openings for God's grace. And I've observed in 20 years of ministry that the most beautiful things in the world are people who have been healed and forgiven and restored by a loving God. Brokenness allows this to happen. So what if our prayer was something like this? God, take my broken pieces and remold them in ways that seem best for you. Okay, so in verse 3, what happens is Jesus tells us how to inherit the kingdom of heaven. Now in verse 5, Jesus tells us how to inherit the earth. In verse 5, he says, God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth. So I look into the world. Maybe you see things differently than me. I look into the world and I see so much vanity. I see vanity that almost like borders on narcissism. And sometimes I look into the mirror and unfortunately I see that and I hate it. I see so many of us trying to appear that we're someone that we're actually not. And on the inside, we're just dying out to be authentic and fully present with somebody. Now, when I observe humility, I absolutely love it. I am attracted to humble people. I want to sit at their feet. I want to listen to their story. I want to serve alongside of them. Without humility, it is not going to be possible to learn. Without humility, true love cannot exist because love values somebody else as much as it does self. Humility is going to be necessary for us to be forgiven. Humility is going to be necessary for us to forgive. So what I wanted to do this week is I looked into some different authors about what they said about humility. And then we're going to look at a parable that Jesus tells about it. But C.S. Lewis, who was a Christian theologian, he said, and this gives us a glimpse of what true humility is. He says, true humility isn't thinking less of yourself. So you can still love yourself, and you should love yourself. Humility isn't, thinking less of yourself. It's just thinking of yourself less. So we think about as other people as much as we think of ourselves. Emerson said, it's a great person who is always willing to become little. So there's no job that we can't do. There's no words that we can't speak. Whether it's picking up a little piece of trash that no one else to this point has picked up, or whether it's saying those simple words, I'm sorry. And Hemingway said, there is nothing noble in being superior to your fellow man. True nobility is being superior to your former self. So it's not this thing about I'm going to be prideful because I'm better than that person. This is, daily I'm going to do the things that it takes to grow and develop and mature. Now, according to Jesus, and this is going to be important stuff, according to Jesus, those who can pull off this humility thing, you will inherit this earth. So Jesus tells a story in Luke chapter 18. And here, starting in verse 9, he says, he told the next story to some who were complacently pleased with themselves over their moral performance and looked down their noses at the common people. So here's these guys that thought they were pretty cool. They looked down on other people. 2 men went to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee. So here you have a religious leader. This is someone who is theologically educated. People have looked to the Pharisee for spiritual leadership. So, and the other was a tax man. The Pharisee posed, and he prayed like this: "Oh God, I thank you that I'm not like those other people, those robbers, crooks, adulterers, or heaven forbid, like that tax man over there. I fast twice a week and I tithe all my income." So he's got this behavior stuff down. He fasts twice a week. I actually fasted twice last week too. Once was like for 40 minutes and once for 2 hours, but I'm guessing he probably fasted a little bit longer than that. He gives 1/10 of his income. It's something to be said for that. But then let's listen to the prayer of the next person. The Pharisee here would represent pride, the tax collector. And when I say tax collector, I'm not saying IRS agent. When we say tax collector, we're thinking a thug or a bully who works from a license with the government to go extract as much money from the people as he can. So he says in verse 13, meanwhile, the tax man slumped in the shadows. His face is in his hands, like he can't even look. He doesn't glare to look up, and said, "God, give mercy. Forgive me, a sinner." Now that is a prayer of a humble person. Regardless of where his past roads have led him, he has come to the temple and prayed that simple prayer: "God, give me mercy. Forgive me, I'm a sinner." Now Jesus, what he did is oftentimes he twisted things around. He does this thing called a reversal, and we have it here. Now you think, okay, the Pharisee prays, he gives all this money, he fasts, then we got this tax collector over here, he's praying, and we know that God's going to take the side of the Pharisee, right? Well, Jesus commented, this tax man, not the other, went home right with God. If you walk around with your nose in the air, you're going to end up flat on your face. But if you're content to simply be yourself, you'll become more than yourself. So here we have the Pharisee, who represents pride, the tax collector, who represents humility. In James chapter 4, verse 6 says, "And he gives grace generously. As the scriptures say, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble." So I want to close with this morning. I'm just going to give us a little quiz. I'm going to let you determine where it is that you fit in this story. And maybe those 5 minutes of praying, you can deal with some of this stuff. So here's how we determine if we're too much pride in our life. So number one, when someone challenges you or confronts you or there's conflict in your life, do you really get overly defensive? Okay, so if that's you, there's probably a good chance you're dealing with some pride, because you couldn't be wrong, right? Number two, do you find yourself saying, "I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to say I'm sorry"? Okay, so I'm going to give you a picture of 100% of all human conflict. It's like there's never been a human conflict where one party has been totally 100% responsible. Like you live in this relational system where sin has happened. Now, it could be 99%, but you're still going to have 1% of the responsibility. Now, it's closer, it's going to be like 20 or 30 or 40 or 50%. But the prideful person is not willing to say, I'm sorry, because they don't believe that. If you don't believe what I'm saying now, that means you have a lot of pride, and we probably need to talk afterward. Number 3 would be, do you gossip? Now, the reason we would gossip is to belittle others, to feel better about ourselves, which is an example of pride. Number 4, do you find yourself saying, I don't need help? The proud person can do everything by himself or herself. Number 5, do you obsess over the opinion of others? If someone says something critical or writes something on your Instagram page and you don't like it, do you obsess over that? And number 6, do you celebrate even privately at the failure of another person? Now, if you have 1 or 2 or 3 of those, I think pride is an issue that we're going to need to look at. Now, humility, it looks different. Humility, are you willing to voluntarily confess your sins? To be authentic with yourself and with God, like who you actually are. The humble person will do that. Do you give sacrificially and not seek any credit for it? The humble person is saying that there's other people who are just as important as me, so I'm going to share my earthly blessings with them, and I'm not going to seek a darn bit of credit for this because it's just simply the right thing to do. Number 3, I treat others like I would treat myself, like we live up to Jesus' great teaching here. And then number 4 is we ask for help. So we're going to close our worship experience this morning as we celebrate the Lord's Supper together. And one of the things I was thinking about this earlier this week is Jesus was talking in Matthew chapter 5, verse 5. Like there he talked about being humble. He says, for those of you who are humble, you'll inherit the world. Now, what Jesus didn't just do is talk about humility. From Matthew chapter 5, verse 6, which is the next verse, to Matthew chapter 28, verse 20, which is the last verse in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus lived out and he embodied humility. This was found in the Last Supper when Jesus still was serving his friends. So Jesus, he blessed the bread, he took the bread, he broke it, and said, friends, this is my body that is given for you. When you eat of this, do so in remembrance of me. So as you take the bread this morning, what I want you to do as you remember Jesus is I want you to remember his humility. Jesus was as far away from pride as you're going to find. He listened. He served. He was so patient with the disciples and everybody else. Even those people that he confronted them with grace and in love. So later in the meal, Jesus, he took the wine and he gave thanks and he blessed it and said, friends, this is my... Okay, so I want you to listen to this because these are the words of a humble man. He said, friends, this is my blood. It's the blood of the new covenant that has been given for you and the forgiveness of your sins. When you drink of this, do so in remembrance of me. The next day, he talked about humility there. The next day, he actually demonstrated humility to the point of humiliation when he died on the cross so that each of us may have life. The humble person is the one who gives his life or her life for their friends.